I would just like to open by stating that this scoping review was informed by the thesis statement Disabled Leadership as Cultural Leadership, a scoping literature review from 1977 to present, which primarily aims to identify any gap in literature pertaining to cultural leadership in terms of the exclusion of implicit or explicit reference to leadership within disabled arts by identifying the dominant themes in existing literature. This was the intention that it could form the basis and/or justification for more targeted research in arts and cultural leadership with specific reference to disabled leaders and leadership. For anyone who has read any of my submissions during my undergraduate and master's degrees, I like to keep things simple. Hence, I will give a brief outline using 3 words: why, how, and what. Why did I choose this topic? Only months into the recent pandemic, in June 2020, an open letter to the then Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport from disabled leaders, artists and inclusive companies from across the UK raised concerns over the future of disabled people within the arts and cultural sector, seeking assurances that priority would be given in order to avoid regression in the disability and inclusive arts sector. It was by no means the first time that concern over inclusion of disabled people had been raised. Alan Sutherland, author of Chronology of Disability Arts, told the Moving On Festival in 1989 that disabled people have learnt the importance of taking control of the things that affect their lives and so must have organisations of rather than for disabled people. One of the personal drivers for this research was most definitely an affiliation with Northern Ireland's based disabled-led arts charity University of Atypical. The association has afforded me a fantastic opportunity to observe leadership within the context of an organisation that has supported disabled and deaf people involvement in the arts as far back as 1993. It is probably worth noting that this is the only organisation representing the interests of disabled artists in Northern Ireland. It is possible that the survival of this organisation and others like it may very well be dependent, as the aforementioned open letter suggested, on greater recognition of the importance of nothing about us without us. I felt, therefore, in the wake of the pandemic, it was a necessary and timely piece of research. How did I go about it? I will openly admit that methodology was the most challenging aspect of the research, as it was imperative that a robust strategy was applied. I found it was necessary to immerse myself in what could possibly have stood up as a secondary piece of research in itself, that of review types. Having explored the 14 review types and associated methodologies described by Grant and Booth, the scoping review was the only review described as being a preliminary assessment of the potential full picture. By mapping existing literature in terms of dominant themes, it is possible to identify gaps there may be. Moreover, it provided a partially adaptive iterative process whereby it was possible to revisit stages and therefore maintain a fundamentally non-prescriptive approach which ensured that there was room for continual improvement necessary to complete a reliable and valid review of which primary aim was to identify gaps in existing literature. What did I discover? To summarise, the overarching conclusion of this scoping review was that there is indeed a gap in the literature pertaining to cultural leadership in general, and more specifically to disabled leaders and leadership of disabled arts. The thematic analysis clearly showing that the main focus is on the mechanics of leadership itself. The largest number of items being attached to innovation and entrepreneurship, with a rather surprising general lack of consensus about exactly what or who a cultural leader should be. This review is therefore important as a baseline or starting point for future systemic review and potentially primary research that may start what may be uncomfortable conversations that I feel are of vital importance for the growth of disability arts. Thank you for listening.